Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second of 3 CMMC executive briefings. I'm Leela Salim. I'm with FedMine, and I'm joined today by Johnathan Lightfoot of Symbiont. We talked yesterday about CMMC and why it matters. One of the big things that came up in our presentation yesterday was about the Pathfinder contracts, and Johnathan shared that link with us today that he was referencing yesterday. I put it in the chat, so that should talk about the contracts that have been awarded so far that we know about that Pathfinder project. And today we are going to talk about the requirements for CMMC. Everything's being recorded. I will send out all 3 recordings along with the slides tomorrow after our presentation tomorrow, so that everything's together. And looking forward to learning more today about the requirements of CMMC. So yes, again, we'll have our discussion with Johnathan, and you can use the Q&A to submit your questions, just like yesterday was fantastic. And we will answer those questions at the end of Johnathan's presentation. I will let Johnathan get into what he's got today, talking about CMMC requirements. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I moved my microphone a bit on my desk last night. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for day 2 of this. Again, I wanted to do this presentation and break it down into some more bite-sizable pieces, because the other presentations I've been to, seemed like drinking from a water hose, and I wanted to make sure that when we gave a presentation that we talked more about in detail in little bite-sized chunks. So today, we're going to talk about CMMC requirements. Layla, can you go to the next slide, please? Now, yesterday when I spoke, I talked about CMMC, the history, where it came from, and things like that. But you know, when you look at what a CMMC is, you have to figure out, well, what is it protecting? What is it actually being put into place for? You can see here on the slide, we have definitions of FCI and CUI. FCI standing for Federal Contract Information, and CUI standing for Controlled Unclassified Information. Like I said, you see the definitions on the slide, but you know, some examples of FCI or federal contract information could be things like process documentation, blueprints, contract performance results, things like that. So anything that the government provides or that a contractor is going to develop while under contract with the government is going to be considered FCI, or could be considered FCI. CUI data sets, on the other hand, this could refer to things like IP, intellectual property, information from legal proceedings. Then you could even add in health information or documentation with regards to HIPAA. All of those items are unclassified under DoD, but the contractor is supposed to treat this as sensitive enough so that it's safeguarded, okay? There's been some discussion over the years about FCI and CUI, and these definitions on the screen keep popping up, but I thought it'd be helpful if you all actually heard about some actual information or examples of information. And this is what DoD is trying to safeguard. Now you might be thinking, well, gee, you know, if this information needs to be safeguarded, why doesn't DoD just simply slap a classification tag on it, right? Call it classified, secret, or top secret. And that whole process is one in of itself and all. But if you look at the data, the way they're looking at it, they're like, you know, it's not really something that we want to go through that process with. However, some of this information is very important and could lead to a breach. So when you think about yourself as a government contractor, you know, you get information on, you know, our RFPs that are coming out, right? And even inside the RFP, there's information that could give a hint or a clue to an outside actor, or an evil actor, as I like to think of them, to use that little strand of information to ascertain a bigger picture of something or things like that. I know when I was in the Navy, for instance, I used to be on an amphibious ship, and we used to do operations with the Marines, and we have to go down to a place called Cherry Point, North Carolina, to pick up the Marines. You know, the information about, a bus company being hired to take the Marines from Lejeune up to Cherry Point or over to Cherry Point, that in of itself is not a big deal. But if you understand how the military works and how the Navy works, that's information that's very useful to an agent, right? They're thinking, wait a second, they have a requisition out here for 50 buses in Lejeune to transport troops to Cherry Point. So if you know what's on the other side of Cherry Point, there's naval ships picking them up. So again, that's information that's unclassified in and of itself. But when you start putting it all together, it gives you some information that maybe we don't need the enemy to know about. We also have information that is public, that is marked for public release. Those items should be marked accordingly. However, they may or may not be the case. When it comes to government information, it's best to err on the side of caution. If you feel that information you receive should be released to the public, but it's not marked as such, don't release it, right? Just conform to what the appropriate parties and mark it accordingly, and then release it if you need to. All right, so that's what it's protecting. CMMC is designed to protect FCI and CUI primarily. Layla, can we go to the next slide, please? So under that protection of FCI and CUI, you might be wondering, how you will determine what level of certification that you're going to need. The first thing you have to do is you have to start by evaluating the type of data that you're going to receive, okay? So as I mentioned yesterday, there are 5 maturity levels in CMMC, and you can see them on the right-hand side and the left-hand side of the different 5 levels and what they're covering. When you are talking about CMMC, you're going to hear a term called OCS or OSCs. OSCs are organizations seeking certification. So if you ever hear that term, the OSC, that means you, right? Your company is what they call an OSC, but an OSC can contain any one of the 5 or any level of certification they want, okay? If you'll notice on the slide here, you have level 1 at the very bottom. That is the lowest level of security, and you'll notice that it's basically checking for your good cyber hygiene, and it's going to cover what we call practice. I'll go over those later on. But all the way at the top, you notice you have level 5, right? And that one is progressive, and it's covering about 172 different practices. So you'll see here that when you start going into these different levels, there's a higher standard, if you will, of what's expected of you. Now, if you'll notice here, we have for levels 1 and level 2, right? Performed and documented. This is primarily for FCI information, like what we covered before, okay? The level 2 is kind of a weird one. You'll hear people talk about CMMC level 1, and you'll hear people talk about CMMC level 3, right? But you'll hardly ever hear somebody say, oh, we're gonna go for a CMMC level 2, right? The reason for that is CMMC level 2 is considered a transition stage between 1 and 3. So basically, if you'll notice here in level 1, you only have 17 practices that you're responsible for covering. Level 3, on the other hand, has 130. So if you look at that difference, right, from 17 to 130, that's a lot of additional practices. So level 2 is in there sort of like as an intermediate, because it has 72 practices. So you'll be going from maybe I'm identifying 17, I'm working on those 17 areas for my level 1. Then I'll say, okay, let's go for level 2. That gets me up to 72 practices. So that's not as big of a jump as jumping all the way up to that level 3, but it's known as the transition step. And levels 1 and 2, that is for handling FCI. Now you'll notice on the little diagram here, there's a little bit of a gap, right? It goes from level 2, then there's a gap between level 2 and level 3. When you start getting into level 3, that is when you're starting to work with projects that have CUI in them, right? So as far as determining what level should you go for, you would have to determine, well, what kind of information am I going to be touching and having? Earlier yesterday, I spoke about the different Pathfinder projects. And I just want to correct one little thing you said, Layla, about the Pathfinder projects. The Pathfinder projects, there are currently 7 of them that have been identified, right? They do not have CMMC requirements on them yet, okay? They are being evaluated for having CMMC requirements in them, okay? Some of them may have them, some of them may not at the end of the day, okay? But once they figured out which ones and everything, they're going to put them on there. Now, I know this question is going to come up because it came up a lot yesterday. I do not know what all of the contracts are going to be for Pathfinder or the other ones that are going to happen between 2021 and 2026. I don't know. I went to my group that I talked to about CMMC, a bunch of experts, and asked that question last night. We had a lengthy discussion. And at the end, we all said, we don't know. We were searching the internet. We were searching the different DoD sites, seeing did they drop any nuggets and telling us anything? And no, we could not find anything yet. As we are in the middle of the year, I would suspect that we should start hearing something from DoD. But again, I'm from the outside looking in, so I don't know which ones. But do know that when they do start putting these on the contracts, what they're going to look at when they make that DFARS clause in the RFPs, they're going to look to see what type of information is going to be expected on this contract or this project, if you will, or contract. And that's going to help them determine what level of certification they're going to apply to that RFP. So if they determine, hey, there's going to be some CUI in there, they might say, okay, that's a CMMC level 3 is going to be needed by any contractor who wants to bid on it. So keep that in mind too, of depending on the type of work is going to depend on the type of CMMC level that's going to be applied to that contract. And if you as a business want to bid on that, you have to at least be able to have that level. Now, another thing to keep in mind is if you'll notice on the screen here, these practices, they're layered on top of each other, right? So if I have level 3, a CMMC level 3, I'm covered for level 2 and level 1, right? Because they all build on each other. So I can't get to level 3 and skip levels 1 and 2. So they do build on each other. So you could have a situation where you say, oh, I'm CMMC level 3, right? And you see a contract come out and says, okay, we're requiring CMMC level 2. Well, you could bid on that, right? Because you say, hey, we have a level 3, so I can bid on stuff 2 and 1. But if something came out and said, okay, we're requiring CMMC level 5, then you'll be like, well, I can't because I'm a level 3, so I'll have to find a prime or somebody else who has a 5 in there to bid on that alone. All right. Are there any questions? Oh, last answers at the end. I keep thinking this is a live call, Layla. You kept telling me don't do that. Let's go to the next slide, though. All right, so let's look at a real world example of these levels and how they apply as far as it concerns, and trying to determine which certification someone might need or a company might need on there. So here we have a contract to build a federal building between a government agency and a company we're calling Unified Incorporated. The prime contractor has a certification level of 3. Unified Inc. here wants to subcontract with a company called Somerset Inc., which is a janitorial services company. They also want to sub to or subcontract Construction LLC for providing some blueprints, and also to a company called Corporate Lounge and Symbiont for project management and consulting services. Somerset at the top, they're only going to be used for janitorial duties. The janitors are only going to work during business hours in areas where security is available to allow them entry, meaning they don't need any keys, they don't need any key cards, or in any way have access to the building on their own. So they basically have to come in, they check in, they may go to their closet or wherever they have to get their supplies, and there's going to be a security person escorting them around, okay? So, and they have no access to any of the restricted areas where there may be FCI or CUI is being housed. So in this scenario, the company Somerset Inc. does not require a CMMC certification since it's not going to be handling or using any FCI or CUI. And we can guarantee that because they also don't have access to walk around there by themselves. So there, yeah. If it wasn't highly controlled, so let's say, for instance, they were just going to let them walk around at will and just empty trash cans or do things like that, then Somerset would have to look at getting CMMC. But because it's so tightly controlled, they don't need to really worry about they don't need to have CMMC certification on their own. Okay. Now, Construction LLC, they're going to be working on blueprints, right? So these blueprints are going to be created and modified throughout the duration of the project, as what happens when you're in construction. Or they can also be provided in the RFP. So naturally, since Unified is going to be using Construction LLC for the blueprints, they may just give them the RFP as well, so they can assist with putting together blueprints. In both of those cases, that would fall under FCI potentially, right? So this could be contractor information. So in this case, Construction LLC would need an ML1, maturity level 1, or maybe 2 if they wanted to transition certification, right? Because they're just going to be handling the FCI stuff. However, Corporate Lounge and Symbiont are going to be providing project management along with consulting services for the overall project. They're both going to have access to FCI and CUI. So therefore, they're going to have to maintain a maturity level 3 certification, just like Unified Inc. does. But I want to make some points because I know a couple of yours are already thinking some things here, okay? In the way it's written, CMMC says that if a subcontractor doesn't have the appropriate certification, the prime contractor can provide controlled access to CUI from their environment, all right? Which means Unified Inc., because they are the prime, what's going to typically happen on the way it's written is the prime has to be able to achieve that certification level. So since Unified is the prime, they've said this contract requires level 3, Unified must have it, okay? Now we've all seen this, right? Whenever we bid, the prime's past performance, for example, right? The prime's got to have that past performance. The subs, they can't really help in that situation. The same is true here. Now, because the prime, in this case, Unified, has ML3, they could provide controlled access to Corporate Lounge and Symbiont, right? And let's say that Symbiont and Corporate Lounge didn't have any certification, like I don't have it, right? In order to provide that, in order to use them, Prime could say, look, I will provide the information to you in a controlled way so that you all can work on the contract, all right? Hopefully you're with me on this. There's a con to this, though, that you have to think about. The con for the situation is that the subcontractor may have to physically travel to the location of the prime site, which could become inefficient and possibly affect your contract terms as well. So those of you who've worked on bids, you know that you have your on-premise rate, you have your government on-premise or on government rate. What's to stop the prime from saying, hey, look, we'll provide you with office space in our headquarters so you can be on our network and everything else. They might say, you know what, we want you to look at your pricing differently. No, okay? Keep that in mind because you are dependent on them for something that you should have, which is being able to get that information electronically, work on your own facilities, or work at it wherever you need to work at it again. Again, this is an option if your business does not have a proper certification, but it's not the most ideal. I can also tell you in my experience, I'm working with 2 very large primes. Both of those primes back in October of last year, October 2020, came out to their sub teams and told all of us, start working on your CMMC. And I was able to talk to a couple of the managers, the program managers there, and they were like, look, the way we're looking at this is we want our subs to have their own certification. We don't want to have to deal with any headaches and things like that. So I don't know if you all are starting to hear that right now, but I do know that like one of the primes we're actually bidding on a contract that we know is going to be subject to CMMC eventually. And they're already saying, look, to the team, and there's like 200 of us subs on this. They said, look, if you don't get your certification on your own, we're not going to want to do any exceptions with you. We will move on to other subs that do have it. So that's the other thing to keep in mind is although the primes do have that option, from my experience, the primes are saying, no, we're not going to execute on that. We want you to have your own so that we can keep this, keep things moving. So that's another reason to keep it in mind. And also know that traveling, and as y'all can imagine, I mean, going to a prime's location to work, that's just not ideal, period. Okay, Layla, your next slide. All right, meet the experts. So something to think about. When CMMC got stood up, DoD said, look, we're not going to manage this overall, right? We're putting together the overall, the architecture of it, and we're saying, here's what the strategic value and the direction we want to go into it, but we don't want to manage it. So one thing they did is they set up this thing called the CMMC AB. That is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Accreditation Board, right? And this board is the one that's going to be running the CMMC program, if you will, for DoD. Currently, the CMMC AB, they've had some leadership changes. I don't know if you've seen it in the news, but there's been some shuffling going on right now. I have to admit that as an RPO myself, I was nervous for a few months because I was like, what's going on? Because they were making some very big changes. But I can tell you with confidence that I've been watching and I've been reading and I've been talking to people, and I think they're finally getting locked in the way they should be. And that's a really good sign for me, especially. But the accreditation board is, it consists of about 13 industry members, executives, and decision makers. And they're the ones who are putting together the policies, they're putting together the standards. Well, the standards are already out there, at least the first two came out. But they're really just trying to get that process together of getting companies and organizations certified and what that looks like and all. And they made some really tremendous strides over the last few months, especially. These personnel oversee the CMMC ecosystem pertaining to the entities and individuals that will directly or indirectly provide services throughout the certification process, okay? Two organizations that you, as an OSC, remember an OSC is an organization seeking certification, but two organizations that you should be familiar with are RPOs and C3PAOs, okay? So what do these acronyms mean? You have an RPO. RPO is what we call Registered Provider Organization. These organizations provide organizations seeking certification, advice, consulting, pre-assessment and remediation services to ensure assessment readiness, okay? So an RPO's only thing that an RPO can do is what we call pre-assessment activities. So they're gonna go in, they can do a pre-assessment of your organization, see where you are, right? Look at the standards for CMMC, put together, say, for instance, a gap analysis to say, here's where you are, here's where you're lacking, here's your deltas. And then they can also help you with remediating those issues. So all those gaps, an RPO, a registered provider organization, can help you with that. Full transparency, Symbiont, the company I represent, we are an RPO, okay? Now the other side of it, these are called C3PAOs. C3PAOs are certified third-party assessor organizations, right? The C3PAOs, these are the ones who are able to conduct assessments, okay? They can go in, once they get approved, they are actually, when they show up at your door, they're there to look at where you are, compare you to the standard. And remember yesterday I told you there's three results to each standard. Either you met, you didn't meet, or it wasn't observed, right? They're the ones who are going to be doing that, okay? Now, a C3PAO can also do duties of an RPO. So a C3PAO can do pre-assessments. They can help you with your remediation services and things like that. But if a C3PAO does help you with your stuff, so let's say that you got company X, they are a C3PAO. You say, hey, can you do a pre-assessment for us and give us a report and help us remediate it? They'll say, yes, we can. However, once you're done, they're going to say, okay, you're ready for assessment. Now you might say, oh, well, can you do the assessment for us? They'll be like, no, we can't because we helped you. Makes sense, right? They can't, it's like your tutor administering the SAT. That might be a nice situation to be in, but as we know, you can't do that, right? Same is true with them. So a C3PAO can do everything an RPO does. However, it can go a step further and it's also able to do assessments, but it can't do assessments on companies that help with the pre-assessments, all right? So those are three main organizations that you're gonna hear about. Layla, can you go to the next slide? All right, I think that's it.
Looks like that's it.
Oh, look, I even left time for
Did
questions.
you have, okay, yeah, we've got 5 minutes. Um, Looks like there's one question. Where can we obtain a list of all registered RPOs and C3PAOs?
Okay, so to see a list of all RPOs and C3PAOs, can I type in the chat? Am I able to do that? I think I can.
In the Q&A, yeah, you can type it.
I'm going to actually type it into here. CMMC-ab.org/marketplace. Now, before I release this, let me double check because sometimes I may have misspelled it. But hold on one second. So let me get into my thing here. So the CMMC AB, our accreditation board, they actually have a website set up for themselves. And you see, I was going to give y'all the wrong way to get to it because I put a dash. No, it's not supposed to be a dash. So hold on. But part of that, it's going to talk about, you know, the standard. There's FAQ section. They're hiring, so if you're interested, you can actually work there. But also, they also have some videos. So every month, I think they do a video and all. But there's also what we call the marketplace. And can I share my screen? Am I able to share my screen, Layla?
Yes, let me stop my share.
Oh, there we go. All right, let me share my screen. I can give you all a bit of a, there we go. We're gonna share that screen. All right, so when I put in the chat, the CMMC AB marketplace, can I, oh well, anyway, right? And if you go there, you can click on the marketplace link and it's gonna take you to this link here, right? If you're looking for like RPOs, you can simply select the RPO button. I can click search and I can scroll down and I'll see here, these are companies that are RPOs. And you can do a search around the name, city, state. If you want something close, you can say, I want somebody in Florida or Maryland or what have you. Or you can just look at the list here. You'll see here Symbiont. That's my company right up here at the top. Good. But we have all sorts of them. I mean, how many are there now? It changes. You have 513. If I'm interested in wanting to see who C3PAOs, let me see, they don't have them out yet. Yeah, there we go. Authorized C3PAOs. Remember I told you there was only two. Here they are. We have Kratos and Redspin. These are the two certified ones. But also you'll notice here, there's 172 companies right now. I think, Layla, you asked about this before we started. There are 172 companies vying to become C3PAOs. So these are C3PAOs candidates pending their CMMC ML3 assessment. So one of the things about C3PAO is they have to achieve maturity level 3 assessment status before they can become a C3PAO. And right now, remember I told you about the line, there's only 2 of them right now. And a C3PAO they have to go through what we call DIBCAC, which is another organization that does their assessment for them. But you can already see the traffic jam is starting, and this is just with the C3PAO people. Okay.
So we do have some more questions. Let me see here. Would satellites of a company fall under the CMMC level of the main corporation?
Okay, Carol, what you're asking about is a very important question. That's where we get into what we call scope definition. And we're still waiting for CMMC to release the scope definition document, right? This is very important because, as you all know, if you've done like ISO or any other certification, you'll know that defining the scope is very critical in determining whether or not, how successful you're going to be. With satellite companies, possibly, especially if that satellite company is handling FCI, CUI. So if I use my example of Construction LLC, the ones who are doing the blueprints, maybe they're headquartered in Boulder, Colorado, and they have a satellite office in Pennsylvania. That Pennsylvania office is where they do all the blueprints. So in that case, that office might fall under the scope. However, maybe they have another office down in or a factory down in Atlanta that just makes I don't know, cables. So they just make cabling. So that factory may not. But that is a very good question, Carol, and I really can't give you a definitive answer until two things happen. A, we get that scope documentation from CMMC that tells us how to scope things, and B, understanding the organization that's asking the question, how they're set up.
Thank you. So there's 3 more questions. I know it's 12:30, but hopefully we can zip through.
Okay.
Is the CMMC certification only relevant to those contractors that utilize network, cloud, or cybersecurity?
It is
It's a
relevant to
big
you
question.
if you use a computer in your business, it's relevant to you, right? Because this is the controlling of your network. And I don't care if you have a standalone computer, if you're using a computer in that business and you want to do work with the federal government and you're not giving them an off-the-shelf product, then yeah, it's going to be applicable to you.
What is the average cost for a RPO?
What do you mean the average cost for an RPO? Are you talking about for when they do the pre-assessment work or the cost of becoming an RPO? I'm kind of confused. Maybe
You'll
it'll
have
come
to
back
come
to
back.
us.
Oh,
Oh, for a
pre-assessment.
pre-assessment. Okay. So Joe, I can't really answer that because it depends, right? Some organizations, it might not be that much to them. Maybe it's one office and they're using, let's say, Office 365 GCC High, right? That may not require much work. However, let's say it could be several different endpoints that are there that have to be evaluated. Maybe it's the larger the company, the more requirements you're going to have, right? You're going to have policies and procedures and training and standards and all this stuff. It just depends. And I can't really say what the average cost is going to be.
Do you know the average time frame to go from a level 0 to 3?
That one I can't
Uh,
really say either, Joe, because the thing is we haven't really I mean, this is all so new, so it's all starting to happen. I know that I worked with an organization that didn't have anything hardly, and we are still I mean, we had a 10-month project plan we had to put together for them, and we are only on week, or not week, but month 7 right now, so we have 3 more months. Hopefully we'll hit it. But
and
a lot of these
what?
things that you put in place, it's not just a matter of saying, it's not like the old ISOs, right? I remember the day when we, managers, we all sat around and we just wrote policies like crazy. I mean, the ink was still wet when the assessor came in, and they sort of like, oh, good policy. No, with this one, they're going to look at that as well as look at your training. I mean, they could interview, they can go into your logs. I mean, they get to pull 3 bits of evidence, right? And so you don't know where it's going to come from. So let's say, for instance, you want to, one of the things is multi-factor authentication, right? I want to put multi-factor authentication out there. My organization is 100 people, let's say. I can't just turn on multi-factor authentication, right? There's a ramp up period, right? I got to train my workforce on this. This is coming. What is it? I have to get them ready and prepared for when we do say we're bringing up multi-factor authentication. That could be 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks before I can finally go back into my pre-assessment and check off that, like, yes, we have done multi-factor authentication. And there's other things that have to be put in place as well that might take longer. Yes.
Okay, 2 more. As a RPO performing an assessment and support, is your work 100% virtual, or do you have to be on site to do this?
So far, Kevin, we've done our stuff virtually, but we only handle level 3 and below. And we found that we can do that virtually, right? When you start talking about getting into level 4 and 5, however, there is some actual physical security requirements that are there. And I'm not sure how those companies are going to do those, if they're doing them on site or remote. But ours have been remote. But we are, my staff who does that, they're all vaccinated. We're comfortable with travel. And we do have some clients who say, you know what, I'm old school, Johnathan. I want you to bring somebody, I need to see somebody on site with us, and we can help deal with that as well. Okay.
That's a good question. Okay, you mentioned 365 High. Can you explain more about that? Does Microsoft have an approved CMMC solution?
So Joe, you're asking me, okay, 365 High, Office 365 High, at a high level, because I don't want to go too much into 365 High, what it is and how it works. But 365 High has been approved by, is FedRAMP approved, right? And it's been like that for a while now. That is not a CMMC solution out the box like it is, though, but it gets you really close to it. So there's just a few more things you have to do with 365 High, GCC High, than if you had 365 commercial, right? There's a lot more changes and stuff in there. But is there an approved CMMC solution by Microsoft? As far as I'm concerned, not yet.
Okay. For companies that are trying to get this process started and do primarily site preparation and land clearing, sometimes on secure installations, can you recommend a CMMC level to aim for?
You know, I really can't, because, you know, yes, you say you do site preparation and land clearing, but I really don't know much about the type of contracts you're engaging in. So I don't know what kind of CUI might be in those RFPs, for instance, or the orders that you're working on. So I can't just say, oh yeah, get this level and you'll be good. I don't know. I would recommend to everyone at least look at your level 1, look at getting level 1 certified, right? So at least you started that process, and that's just making sure you have good hygiene, right? Making sure that we are, you know, my employees are trained on phishing attacks, and they know what malware is and things like that. Okay.
Do you think food services like catering will require CMMC?
I mean, it could possibly. I mean, okay. Remember, it's about if you're handling CUI or FCI, right? If you talk about catering, and again, I'm a vet. If you talk about catering, and I need a caterer in Norfolk Naval Base for a change of command, let's say 6th Fleet, or not 6th, 6 doesn't sit there. Let's say 2nd Fleet change of command ceremony, right? That information in of itself is not a big deal. However, if I'm an adversary, it might be, right? I know, oh, wait, this catering service they're doing something big on Norfolk Naval Base. So is there a change of command about to happen with a major component of the Navy? Right. So I don't know. It all depends on what kind of information that you're processing. And that's going to be a contract to contract basis, right? They are going to determine, we're calling this FCI, we're calling this CUI and all. Me personally, if I want to do business with DoD, it doesn't hurt for me to get at least a level 1 certification. So at least I say, hey, I'm there, right? And then if something comes up where I need a level 2, hey, great, I've already got my level 1, just got to do a couple more practices, I have my level 2, and so on and so forth. I would rather err on the side of, I want to be ready in case of whatever comes down the pipe. Okay.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
And
always prepared.
yes. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Joe, for your questions. I think there's a chat.
I don't understand somebody. I don't know what Robert put there.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much. We are 8 minutes over on today's executive briefing. Tomorrow's our final one. This has been so great and enjoyable. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about today was requirements and tomorrow's preparation. Am I right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern. And thank you so much. See you again tomorrow.
Okay.
Have a good rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.